chosen one!
Welcome to the Chosen One. Today I have a special guest from Rogue Support. We got Daimyo Matt in the house.
Yeah, excited to be here.
Yeah, I figured I'd bring on the guy who actually runs some GTs and he runs some major events to talk about our subject today. We are going to be going over a GT prep list that you can do at home to get started for your GT, whether you're playing for fun or competition in general. And it'd be nice to also get some info on the organizer front. So, Matt, how long before a GT do you have to start prepping for it as an organizer? Getting everything like together and everything.
I mean, it starts, especially with how AMG's process is for applying for GTs, it really starts almost a year out, just in the idea of making sure you're capable of doing it. You know, AMG asks events to apply, you have to confirm, like, yes, we got the tables together, we got the space, things like that. So that's kind of the first step. Then it really comes to about 2 months out, depending on the size, I feel like is where you're really kind of drilling down to the final, make sure I have all my tables ready, make sure I've got, if you're doing additional prizes besides what AMG does, you've got those things planned. The big thing also is for at least a lot of the GTs I run, they're linked with major conventions. So I work on PAX with obviously PAX Unplugged, ACO, Atlantic City Open, that's Frontline Gaming, and then Nova Open. So we're also communicating with a convention organizer who's running, a lot of other events. And certainly Shatterpoint is newer. It's not Warhammer 40K or Age of Sigmar. So you have to spend a lot of time kind of educating these people on, hey guys, like, yes, the game is a 3x3. We need a little more space than that. Here's what we're gonna need. So it's a lot of easy, quick communication, but it really kind of builds up. And I'd say 2 months is when you really kind of get into that crunch time.
Yeah, I can definitely see that. And then, well, like, how do you acquire the train if you can't like get it printed yourself? Do you have to like ask people to borrow it, or do you have to ask AMG for it to send them over train? I know, like for
Well, so
Decepticon, they have like a whole group of people that bring everything in.
Well, so Adepticon actually was originally, so Adepticon year one was all AMG. Obviously AMG, Adepticon and Gen Con are the big conventions that AMG is a major sponsor for. So, Adepticon year one, they just said, hey, you need us to get a bunch of tables. You need to send us a bunch of boxes. And they have a team of people who do a great job with like taping things off and quick priming to get those cool colors, to let the tables pop a little bit more. Most of the time, if you can't get things printed on yourself, a lot of it's crowdsourcing. To the best of my knowledge, AMG doesn't have like terrain that they just send around to conventions. It's a lot of communicating with your community, and most GTs right now, as they're building up and growing, are really very community driven. I would say outside of, just the people I know who are also TOs, outside of like Todd and Aubrey from Event to Struggle who run LVO, that's all their terrain basically. Obviously these events in the Northeast that I'm running are all my terrain that I've printed and gathered. A lot of it, I think Zi-Fi is all of their terrain, but it's also for them, I believe it's a lot of their community terrain. So yes, you've got a couple people who are printing stuff, but they also crowdsource within their community. These GTs are really, especially for terrain, community efforts for sure.
Yeah, I could definitely see that. When it comes to like how many players you're expecting at the GT, like how many players is too much for like just one TO where you're like, I need help, get more assistance.
So AMG does give guidelines to this. Their rule is, they expect an event. If you're going to apply, your goal is to hit 32 people. They say you should have two TOs, and then for as soon as you hit like a 33rd person, they want a third TO, and then for them, it's really every 16. So that's where, in my opinion, is kind of the way I would think about it. 16 people is really where I feel like, even for your local events, where you have to start thinking about a second person to help, and it's not that there's that many times where there's two judge calls going on simultaneously. I just think of the last couple events I've worked on, never happened where I've needed to physically be at two tables at once. It's really the logistics side of things. People have to get checked in. Long shanks, depending on how good your internet is to your convention, long shanks always is a little tricky. TOs have to use the bathroom, right? So you have to the odds that there's a perfect break between rounds where you can sneak away to use the bathroom is not always guaranteed. For Nova, there's three of us, but Simon and myself are both really comfortable with the rules and are basically going to handle being the rules officials. And Anthony is going to be the conductor, as I call it. He's making sure the trains run on time. He's going to be sitting at the yes, he can jump up and answer a rules question. He knows the rules very well, but he's there to manage players, manage Longshanks, manage the clock, so that Simon and I can just focus on keeping everyone in line and executing his, coordination day of. So it takes a lot, but I would say, yeah, 16 is where if I'm a TO, I could handle, 16 to 20 players by myself, but I've also run a couple of these, right? I would recommend anyone new who wants to even get a bigger local scene event going. At 16 people, you should consider having somebody else available to kind of help out.
Yeah, like I can see like these big giant events, and AMG does a good job when they're running their like Adepticon. They had like what was like 8 people there to handle the big tournaments.
Oh, for sure. And they're also running side events. They do. You talk about coordinating an event. They've got the main event going on every day. They've got at least they were doing 8-man pods firing off for first contact missions. They had at any given time, and they were doing learn to plays. More than above just the demos. They had 3 events basically going on at all times up until Sunday, where they only had 2 then. So yeah, they were running basically 8 people deep at all times, and do a great job organizing it all, right? Like, it's a lot.
Yep, I agree with your guys' sentiment though, and the game procedure is kind of a pain. So, how would you go about advertising your event to try and get people to show up to these GTs for any like the local people that got the application through? How would you want? Uh, how would you explain how to get more people to an event from a turnout perspective?
The biggest thing to me is starting. So there's kind of 2 approaches, right? There's online, and then there's more of the in person. So from an online point of view, the unofficial AMG Discord is a really good spot to start. I would go there, and then I would use Facebook. There's 2 Shatterpoints. There's like an unofficial one and an official Shatterpoint Facebook group. That's where I would go online just to post. Not everybody saw the announcement for the GTs, and even then they keep updating that GT list, and not they don't announce it every time they make a change. They just make a change and it just lives out there. So I've seen even a couple of GTs get added that I was unaware of. And then from a local point of view, it's talking with local stores, even reaching out a little farther. If I'm running a GT at my local store, I'm looking at any store within like a 2.5 hour drive. I'm trying to get into their Discord servers. I'm trying to ask them in person if I can do it. I would put up a flyer in a store, in front, like if you can ask them like, hey, for a couple of weeks, I'd want to put this over here by your Shatterpoint stuff, if this is possible. Just something, a little 8x5 card that says like, we have a GT on this date in this location, here's a QR code, or go here to look for more information, or contact this person.
Yeah,
There's certainly word of mouth as well, right? Like, talk to your local players who are more active and have everyone ask every person to bring a friend, right? If every one person brings one person, you've doubled the size of your event, right?
yeah, I could definitely advise like post on all the discords that you can. It's how I'm spreading out, like how people spread out the podcast. You use the content section. Every Discord on the Shatterpoint side, there is usually in a section for events. Post there. Stay active on the Discords, and more engagement's always better. So, on a GP front and on judging, what would you say is the toughest thing about being a judge at these events rather than a player at these events?
The toughest, so there's more of a, I'm gonna go with the broad one first. 'Cause I think this is really the big thing, and it's the confidence for making the ruling. Because I will say one of the hardest judge calls for me to make are the ones that feel obvious to me. Because sometimes I'll walk up and someone will be like, "How does this work?" And I'm like, "This works this way." And I pause for a second. I'm like, "Why are I?" In the back of my mind, I was like, "Why is this person like?" Is this obvious? And more often, people are just looking for a little bit of advice. Like they just want confirmation, right? So those always, I take an extra second to pause there and kind of go, huh, maybe like let me make sure I'm right on this. And we have a good rules for them if you need it, but it's that confidence like, hey, I made a call. The other thing I tell everyone is at my events is, hey, look, and it's in the GT packet, it's in the Premier Showdown packet. An arbiter or the judge is not always perfect. If a ruling is made, that's the ruling at the end of the day. Like that's what we're doing. And I've seen events where an incorrect ruling was made early, and you just, in my opinion, you just stick with that event. If I was that TO and I made an incorrect ruling and caught it, I'd probably say, hey, look, I made the incorrect ruling, but we're going to play it this way the rest of the weekend because that's the ruling I made. It's not fair to have the rule be different for one person than another. But that's tough. I haven't, I haven't encountered that. I haven't seen it come up too often. But it's when you make a ruling, that's what it is. And I will say, most of the time, the most common time I'm called to a table as a judge has almost nothing to do with a rule. It's a measurement. It's someone saying, hey, is this person in range 5 here? Or hey, do I have this shove angle? Or hey, I want to shove this person this way. Are they going to make it? That's the most common ruling that I have as a judge. And everyone always laughs. I keep in my pockets my survival judge equipment. I always have a long movement template, a short movement template, a range 2 template. I have one of those Army Painter straight line lasers, which I know you're not allowed to use as a player in the event. You're not allowed to use any outside measuring tools. AMG does not require that for judges. There's nothing saying a judge can't use an outside measuring tool. And I always keep for myself a blank 40 and 50 mil base in my pocket, right? Everyone has B1, got the core set and has an extra 50 mil and has probably an extra 40 mil laying around. I keep one of each of those in my pocket because sometimes it's easier than moving the model. Like I'm going to take this and put it down there. Like, nope, you're not going to be able to fit. So you're going to stop here on your shove. Done.
That brings me like to my first tip for actual GT prep. Use some, if you're planning out plays and you're practicing for your GT, don't be afraid to use those extra bases to just measure stuff until you get used to depth of field vision and actually like memorize how far things are, just so you have a baseline idea of where your piece can land. Beginning of the game, it's what me and my brother did quite a bit. Is we just used the extra bases when we're planning out our dashes, and then where could we go from there. Just building up a basic understanding of depth of field and let distances is going to be a huge help on your GT scene, and being able to go, you might not need a judge if you have these measurements memorized in your head based on depth of field. Play it enough, you'll get used to it.
Yeah, absolutely. And the thing I always tell people as well is don't be afraid to call a judge if you're not sure. It's funny, as a player myself at GTs, I call a judge a lot, and that's more for me. So I have not great depth perception because I can't get above the table. And if it's close, like obviously when I'm judging, I can use extra tools and make sure I've got a most likely accurate measurement, right? No measurement's gonna be perfect. You're holding it up, there's terrain in the way, there's elevation changes, but when I'm a judge myself, if it's close at all, I tell my opponent, like, I'd rather just call a judge, even if I've had times where my opponent's like, I think you're in. I'm like, oddly, I think I'm out of range. And I'll just be like, let's just call a judge. Like, it takes 2 seconds. I don't want anyone I'm playing against at the end of the game to feel bad, to be like, yeah, I gave you that, but I don't think you were in range. I'm like, then we should just call a judge. Like, I don't care. If I'm out of range, I'm out of range, right? Like, I that's how it is. And you and I have talked about this at Adepticon, and I bring it up all the time. A good way to help with measuring, and we'll do this, I'm sure, a little bit more as we talk about getting ready for a GT, is confirming with your opponent, like working with your opponent to come up with measurements. And as a TO in my opening announcement, I always remind people, like, moving with intent, like talk about with your opponent, like, hey, my goal is to be within range 2 of this objective, but not within range 2 of you to be engaged. Your opponent looks over the table and goes, I agree, you can be there. And we're like, cool, we've now worked together. Because the thing I tell every player is, yes, you are playing against your opponent, but you are also playing the game with your opponent. So you're playing together, work together as much as possible without, like, certainly giving your opponent a competitive edge or losing some competitive edge, but work with them, talk with them.
Yeah, on that note, I am going to give a special shout out to the Shatterpoint community as a whole. My experience with the Shatterpoint community on this front of like the sportsmanship, it's such a difference compared to when I tried to get into Warhammer. Warhammer, my local play group is so elitist, and if you try to call a judge, they will shun you for it. It was such a bad experience that I stopped playing Warhammer and got such a big disdain for it that I'm like, yep, this game's not for me. So shout out to Shatterpoint players and the ability to, play like civilized people.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. I had some similar, and I owned a game store back when I started playing 40K, and I definitely had some similar experiences and had to have a lot of conversations with players like, hey, look, you want more people to play your game. This is not an inviting way to get more people to play your game. And I've certainly played 40K competitively for a while, and it's night and day difference, the community in Shatterpoint.
Yeah. So I guess we can get to the player aspect. What do you do personally to like start for a GT? And do you have a GT actually coming up?
I don't get to play in a GT probably until into the late fall for sure. Now that's more because we are expecting our second child early August, so I'm going to, my wife is assuming everything goes okay. I'm going to be able to go to Nova because we have family help, but it's kind of limited to not being able to travel to farther GTS. But I always approach GT prep in two senses, and the biggest thing being the gameplay side, right? So I want to make sure I'm testing a list and I'm comfortable with my list. Make sure I'm comfortable with all of my rules, and this helps on two fronts. First, obviously, you're going to play better if you're more comfortable with your list, but it's also going to help you as a player when you're at the tournament. Look, these are long days. They're 4 rounds, they're 5 rounds. Mental fatigue sets in, physical fatigue sets in. You're on your feet. The more comfortable you are with your rules, the less you're having to reread things constantly, the less burden on you as a player, and the more you can focus on making the plays in the game, not remembering the rules of the game.
Yeah. And then my suggestion, because on how I do my prep is know your list, but about 3 months out is where I start going. I'm going to start planning for this GT. My first thing that I always go, which primary do I want to take? Doesn't have to be competitive. My first goal is I lock in one primary that I just want to build the best list for that primary. That'll be either my main list I play or it'll be my fun list that I can play at least once. And this is what I did for Adepticon. With Kiat Mundi out, I'm like, I'm gonna lock in Mace. I don't care how bad he is into the competition. I just want this one team that I can have fun with, play it, even if it's just for a single game, because then I can go and feel like I took my own little spin on something. Then I will build a second list that will either complement that list or an all comers list. The last thing I ever want to do is I'm going to copy just the best list in the game and play a min max environment because I may not like the list, but there may be good lists. Nothing is worse than playing a competitive list that you actually don't like at an event.
Yes, I totally agree. You have to, beside like you said, besides being comfortable with the list, you have to enjoy it, right? The game's fun. If I don't like the characters on my board, I feel less engaged with them.
Yeah. My next GT coming up is in August. I'll get to meet Omnis in person, so I'll just have to meet Dizzard. Then, guys, got to drag him to Adepticon. But I'm going to the Evergreen Open alongside the Zion's Finest guys, so that'll be cool. It's going to be. It's already looking like a Shark Tank of an event. But my prep for that one, me and my brother are both prepping for that one, like right now. Part of the reason why this topic came up is we are in the middle of. We pretty much have our lists locked in. The only thing that really can change our lists is the release of dinner. So if we get her before August, which don't know if that's happening or not. Um, but we are playing a lot of games, playing into a lot of matchups, and that's like the next big thing on GT prep as a player is have a play partner that you can actually try and play with, even if they don't play often with you. Try and get some matches or even shadow box against lists that you expect to be at the event. Me and my brother right now, we're testing against a lot of Republic, a lot of Empire, and a lot of Rebels because we think they're going to be the three big things at any given event at this point. And we got to have game plans into those three tags right now.
Yeah, I completely agree. I mean, one of the things I do, so like, Scott B, Evil Houdini is one of my most common local play partners. One of the things that we do is we kind of alternate playing a different list. So like if Scott and I are going to get ready for a GT. Now obviously if I'm running the GT, I just play whatever he asks me to play to help him prep because I'm not playing. But like going into Adepticon, we would take turns of like, hey, today it's going to be I'm testing my list. So I might say, Scott, can you bring a list with like these two primaries? Can you bring something of this style? Even if it's on a list that Scott wants to play, he's going to bring it into me so I can get testing. And he's a good enough player that like yes, he might not be as good at that list as the person who has been playing it for 6 months, but he's going to give me a good enough show of that. And then the next time we play test, we reverse. Scott tells me what to bring into him. And where it also helps, in my opinion, this is something I, as a longtime competitive Magic player, I would always play games with the other lists that are really popular in the meta that I'm not playing because it helps you learn a lot about your enemy when you play and when you jump into their shoes. So when I can play as that opposing list, I might learn more. I might find, oh wow, I might be playing lists and say, wow, when my opponent does this, I really feel like I'm up against my heels. I'm going to remember that and try to use that against them, or vice versa, going, holy cow, this is really strong. Like my opponent can really let me take advantage of this, and I'm going to remember, all right, let's try to not give them that door or that opening next time when I go to play against it. So it does help if you have time to get reps in with the list that you know you're going to play against.
The other thing is if you have access to a decent computer and you can play on the tabletop simulator app, it's not the best tool for practice. I feel that the field of view vision it doesn't translate to IRL play, but if it's the only thing you have to play to test, it's a better resource than nothing at all. It's not my first choice for actual play testing. But if you're just wanting to, even if you're by yourself and you're just wanting to test setups of order random order deck and seeing what your pieces can do, uh, shadowboxing on TTS is actually fairly easy to do, and it can give you a good idea of what your list is capable of on the movement front. Um, and it's just not my first choice. The translation from field of view to actual depth perception of the field, for me, it never really panned out.
I agree, and I 100% agree with your point. Absolutely. And I would like to also highlight one thing you said, because one of the common things I've heard from players who might be coming to a GT and go like, yeah, there aren't a lot of local people to me, so I don't get a lot of in-person games. So I play 90% of my games on TTS. And obviously movement and measurement is easier on TTS, right? There's no question of if I'm in range, you can measure stuff, things like that. I find players have said, I struggled doing the movement stuff in person for the first time. So as you talked about shadow boxing, like if you're a TTS player primarily, you're going to go to an event, just put models on a table and just play out a game just to get used to picking up the tools, moving it. I know it sounds very basic, but I have had players who have been TTS predominant players who have had struggles going into a GT in person because of that. So I'd highly recommend, just like you said, get some reps, get used to moving the physical models. Also, it may encourage you to paint your models then, because it's like, man, this model's gray. I want to get it painted. Like I want it painted on the table. So
Yeah, the big thing is also make sure you guys are taking a list to your playstyle. The worst thing you can do is if you're a proactive player and you like all your actions to be during your own turn, the last thing you want to do is play a revenge list, because revenge lists, you have to remember your triggers. And if you're a very proactive player, you like doing things on your turn, and less mental load on your opponent's turns, because your opponent's going to do what they do, and then you will just respond in turn by because you're an active player. Do not take revenge lists if you cannot play the reactive game. Stick to your strong suits. If you like being able to play the reactive game like you're used to in Magic, where you can respond to your opponent's type of stuff, that's where you play the revenge lists. That's where you can really play these reactive games. The last thing you want to do is take a list that's way outside your play style. It will bog you down and it'll be a hindrance rather than a blessing.
yeah, and one step further, even outside of reactive, is obviously some things have a lot of triggers even on their own turn. Like I know a couple people who have said, man, I always forget coordinated fire, and they've said I'm not going to bring a list with a lot of coordinated fire on like to a GT because by round 4 I'm so tired. I was already forgetting it in my one play test game a week. I'm not going to remember it round 4 of a GT when I've been on my feet for 12 hours. So no, that's a great point. That's really something people should think about. Know yourself, know what you are capable of and want to do. So
And like, don't get over bogged down by the like, oh, I have to worry about this medalist. It'll be better if you're playing just lists that you're comfortable playing with, even if it is a somewhat worse matchup. Most of the matchups in this game currently are really, really 50-50 at this point in the metagame at this point. Like, unless you're playing like Ewoks into something like Vader Iden, where it's just kill, kill, kill. Most matchups are going to be 50-50 at this point. There's nothing that's so over glaring that it's meta's not what it was at Adepticon, where you're playing Vader Iden or you have to play a list that can play into it. It's very open. That's why take advantage of a GT season. If you can get to a GT this season, right, specifically right now with the Balance Pass, prepping for lists is almost going to be non-existent because there's so many lists.
yeah, I mean we've always said it. You and I have had this discussion. I don't think you'd find a high level competitive player or like a podcast host who won't agree that a B tier list that like the back of your hand is absolutely better than an A tier list you picked up 3 weeks before the convention. Without a doubt, you will win more games because you hit the nail on the head. At best, I would say, if you look at the numbers, 60-40 is probably the largest spread for lists, for list versus list head to head. So yeah, I mean that's not a big margin of error. Anybody who's running that list that's slightly disadvantaged, if they know their list better than the other person, has absolutely a chance to win that game, a good chance of winning that game. So you're right, and don't think you have to play the big meta list, which right now, as we were talking before the start of the podcast, the meta is so wide open. It's beautiful. It's so much fun to be a player right now.
Yeah, the balance pass was huge for me. Like as a Mace fan, I'm in like cloud 9 right now because I've been dropping my boy every chance I can get, and I've been loving his current play patterns. Aiden's even fun to play now. Like I picked up Aiden once with Grand Inquisitor. I'm like, this is actually fun. It doesn't feel like I'm cheating by playing, freaking Hask. Everything gets an extra result.
Exactly.
Oh, yeah, by the way, I have a message for you, Scott B. Don't lose until Adepticon because I want to take that trophy from you.
Ah, 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 ah. Yes, the bounty lives. I don't know. Nova's going to be tough. There's a lot of the Nova's going to be a competitive one as well. So
Yeah, I can't wait. Like I'm gonna be in the Bellevue one for the Dragonflight games. And that one's looking like it's gonna be a Shark Tank. We got like Sarah Cruel in there. We got Kenny. We got a bunch of the guys from Zion's Finest. It's gonna be fun. I think I can hang though. I'm gonna
Yeah.
aim to take it down. So, but yeah, no, the GT market scene right now, and just in terms of the game, play lists that are going to be fun. There's no better time to play fun lists than right now because we just had at your event the Hondo with Leia. That is wild to me. And then Ewoks are doing well at the events. Um, so if you want to play Ewoks, play Ewoks. I heard Chirpa has an extremely high win rate right now. So go play
Yeah,
some.
and this is the same thing, right? I don't think anybody would tell you Chirpa is an A tier list, but the people who are playing Chirpa and succeeding with it have been playing Chirpa. Like they've been playing Ewoks before the buff, and now things just got better. Same with Hondo. Like Evan Ritt, who's the person you mentioned who was in the finals with Hondo. Evan was playing Hondo Hunter from the first day I met Evan at Nova last year and played it at Adepticon, played it at PAX. He brings Hondo Hunter. Hondo is his bread and butter. He can recite every card, every word on that card, front, back, side to side. So he just saw like, great, I'm going to build it with Leia now. So that's a prime example of he is so well tested with that model. It just doesn't matter. He's going to play better into people who aren't ready for it because one, they might not have a bunch of test games against Hondo, so they don't know how to play into Hondo, and he knows all the ways to get as much out of that model as possible. He's going to make plays. As somebody watching him who has played a handful of Hondo games and has played a lot of high level games, he made plays with Hondo that I sat there and went, huh, yeah, Hondo can absolutely do that. Hondo can flip 3 points on this turn. Like Hondo can do so. It can do a lot. So I recommend. No model is beyond ability to succeed with. Maybe minus Padme. I don't know. And even then, I've seen people do good with Padme. So
I may be working on the Padme list. Right now, I'm really liking her with Kit Fisto. Really good pairing. It's really aggressive and really good on the point scoring front. She's on the cusp. If she were a little bit more survivable, I think her whole kit would be fixed. The
yeah,
Sabe
she
and
needs a few less words saying handmaiden, a few more words saying republic, and I think that's where she would just become. I think almost too like she'd be great if that came around.
yeah, like I don't think handmaidens need any changing. I don't think Sabe needs any changing. I think those are great models. I still rate handmaidens higher than most just because they can actually threaten the back line.
Yeah.
But yeah, the so what would are you playing in a GT right now if you were to go to an event tomorrow? What would you be playing?
Hmm. I would. So I'm gonna go, and I have not put a lot of thought into this because there's not a soon GT on my horizon. But I'm gonna start with the theory you gave at the top of the podcast. I'm gonna pick a model I want to play, and for me, it's gonna be Princess Leia, charming to the last. Um, I obviously played it at LVO and Adepticon, played the PLC Mando list. I don't think I'd go back to Mando inherently. Honestly, I'd probably after watching Evan play, I'd try out a PLC Hunter list or a Hondo list just to start getting some more reps in, see how that feels. But I'm gonna play PLC. I'm gonna look at things like Mando, Hondo, Cassian, things that have a little bit of extra movement and a little more controlly in nature. And that's probably where I'm starting. And then my second list for me, I like having the yin and yang, both sides of the coin. So if that's my kind of defensive control list, I'm going aggressive for the other one. So I'm going to look at something right now like an Anakin Kiadi list. I might look at like a GI. I still think Iden's good. I'm probably not with the rest of her box, but like I might go GI Iden, GI Vader. But that's kind of where my head's at. I would want to go a Killy list to go to pair alongside the the more defensive controlly list because I like having those two options.
So Spoiler alert on Iden, ISF with her is still game like watch out,
Yes.
your stuff's gonna die. Gideon has we've already dropped it from the list. We are on DTE in that list, or
Mhm.
if you're doing a weird split where you have to compromise not having DTE with if you're doing full Empire Premiere, if you have to compromise DTE, play some Firebrand with Grand Inquisitor, and you can still do your Inquisitor Iden setup that way. Firebrand is just DTE light. She still does stuff on the table, and she's actually got a pretty good hit. The worst unit in that box is the Crosshair, but Crosshair himself as the primary. He is so bad.
He's very one sided, right? All he does is go hunt and kill things, and like, in my opinion, you need a primary who does a little bit more, right? Like, even though yes, Iden just hunted and killed things, she has her wound reaction. She gets to move other people potentially. She has a little bit more to her kit, and she's so fast. And Crosshair just feels like a lesser version of Iden across the board.
Pray we never get Imperial Mandalorians, because if that happens, Armor or Iden will be a thing, and that would be scary.
Oh boy. Yeah, yeah. I mean, I'm sure someday down the line, but by then, well, I'm sure we'll have other stuff. But it would be that would be fun.
Yeah. Obviously, I'm taking Mace Mundi. It's my bread and butter at this point. It's a list that I constantly shout out. Had a whole podcast episode about it. And spoiler alert: my second list features Luke Skywalker, not the secondary. I'm on primary Luke right now. Very much on primary.
Yeah, I'm sure you'll talk more about that. You're recording with one of my co-hosts, Accuser, to talk about Rebels, right? So
Rebels, Scoundrels. I already have the episode name. It's going to be The Good, the Bad, and the Wookiee.
love it, love it.
And we got that recording going on Monday. So that will be the following week's episode for the topic. And I think he's going to be testing some Inquisitorious Han and Chewie at some point. It's a list me and him were talking about, where we're playing Lando, Stormtrooper Sergeant, Han Chewie, and then Grand Inquisitor Riva and Fourth Sister, just to make Han and Chewie Imperial Inquisitors. Riva giving them a 5-die attack and dash board wide is kind of nuts.
Yeah. Yep.
All right. Any closing thoughts you have on prepping for a GT? I think we hit a pretty broad subject area on it. So
Yeah, a couple thoughts. So, one other thing that I hear commonly come up with new players to GTs is players who aren't used to playing mission critical. Um, when you and I always recommend when you're testing for a GT and you're in those final couple weeks where you're doing the real serious testing, consider playing with mission critical in those testing or in those test games. It it comes up a lot more than people think, and I have found the players, like, that's one of the biggest things where players walk up to me and like, we use mission critical at our local store even if it's casual games, um like if it's a casual event, just because players want to keep getting used to it. And it's one of the most common things I hear from players who are breaking out of that threshold from, hey, I play at my kitchen table at home, to now I'm trying to go to a GT to have fun and meet new people. It's that mission critical step is something that people really just aren't used to. I recommend getting a couple games, get used to the mechanic of it, get used to thinking like, okay, we're now close to the end of the game, and we're seeing this visual reminder of extra momentum going in to show us we're near, at the end of the game here.
yeah, I that was a good point. I actually completely just missed the whole point of Mission Critical. There wasn't a game at Adepticon that didn't reach Mission Critical for me. It happened in every round, in every tournament in general. Just the game, the way that Shatterpoint can progress, unless you're just absolutely hammering your opponent down and having the huge advantage, you're gonna hit Mission Critical generally in like 90% of your games. So yeah,
Yeah.
get some practice into it.
And also at high level competitive play, right? No one wants to be the one to make the mistake that costs them the game. So you're taking a little extra, an extra 15 seconds, 30 seconds on every thought. Well, if you do that for every single turn, if each player takes an extra 30 seconds every turn, you've just extended the game by, 15 minutes. So you just have to think about that, like, it's going to take a little more time because it's a more competitive environment. You're thinking about things more. Just be prepared. Keep your testing going with that, because it absolutely can come up. And like you said, games go to mission critical. And even just remembering to put the momentum down. I've had as a judge before, somebody has called me over and been like, "Hey, I don't think we've been putting tokens down for the last 4 turns." I'm like, "Well, then start now. We can't go backwards, because I have no way as a judge to know that you actually did or did not do it." So unless both players unanimously agree that, like, yes, we've forgotten for the last 2 turns, or it's even worse when like one player forgets, not the other. Now, granted, again, playing with your opponent, you guys should both be reminding each other, like, hey, add the cube for mission critical. It's not an optional thing. It's not like a trigger that somebody can forget to use coordinated fire. That's an optional ability. You can't forget to use mission critical. Like, don't think like, oh, I'm gonna not tell my opponent because he forgot to get it, so he doesn't get that force. He just gets it. Like, he has to put the token down. So
Yeah. And like that's what brings up a good point for me is when you're looking at your field of stuff to do and you're trying to make sure you get your turn right, um, you don't need to look at your whole field the entire game. You can save a lot of time in your match by, well, you flip up your order card, you look at what that character can do and all the stuff that he can trigger himself. If you don't like it, reserve them, go on to the next. You don't have to go, what can every piece do in this situation? It's what you can do on the card you reveal. Stay focused in on, I'm going to use a quote from Star Wars. Stay focused in the here on now, not in the future or in the later. As as much as you want to plan ahead, uh, Shatterpoint's a game where yes, you can plan ahead to a certain degree, but your biggest point on the board is going to be the here and now. It's going to be the current activation you have because that is the piece that can absolutely really do your play. Something future down the line might not be lined up because the unit could get wounded or could get just massively displaced. The It's important to prep for the future, but making the best of your activation at the given moment to put you in a better board state now is generally a good idea compared to trying to hinder your game plan on a future play that you're going to try and set up for.
agreed. And I think one of the other things people don't think about going into a GT is the physical aspect. And this is something, it's a long day. You're on your feet a lot. The things I always remind, and I always send, like, the Monday before the GT, I always send an email blast and a Longshanks blast to all my players, reminding like a couple survival guide things and stuff like, hey guys, make sure you have comfortable shoes. Make sure you get a good night's sleep. Make sure you bring, all these GTs have ways to refill water bottles. Make sure you bring a reusable water bottle, because drink water. Like, people forget you're on your feet for a while. Yeah, and some people do that every day, right? There are people who every day are on their feet 12 hours a day. Other people, you sit in a desk chair 8 hours a day. So a GT is a physical change to your environment. Think about what you're wearing. Think about your drinking water. If you're somebody who gets prone to headaches, bring like a couple Tylenol with you. Keep them around. Like, I always bring a couple cough drops just to, like, or like bring a snack if you're somebody who gets hungry, and especially like if you're like, oh, my blood sugar's low, I'm making worse decisions, I'm getting hangry, we're between rounds, like, we're not in our lunch break. Bring like a bring a bar to throw in your pocket. Like, it's those little physical things I think people forget about a lot, because it's a long day. You're like, oh yeah, I'm playing 4 games of Shatterpoint. It adds up. And then I always remind people, like, try to sit down. Like, if my opponent's having a turn, like it's a tough turn, they're making a decision, I might sit down, even if it's for 2 minutes, just to like get off my feet, give my back a little bit of a rest. I think it's something that people don't think about as much when they're getting ready for that GT.
I could definitely stay on the agree. Get water. If you're someone who is addicted to caffeine, have a can of soda or something with caffeine in it before you start it. Sometimes caffeine is more important than food if you have that caffeine addiction. It
Mhm.
will absolutely. That's what I did at that time. I had to pop before every round. Very bad for me, but it helped me stay focused in the zone. And definitely bring food if you can, if your con allows it, because convention food is gross.
Yeah, it's definitely not well, and that's so to something to your caffeine thing and to the food thing. Try not to make any major changes to your like internal biology. If you're someone who does, or like for me, my only caffeine I drink is black coffee. So what I'm not gonna do at a GT is like, man, I'm lagging a little. Let me go grab a monster. Like I don't drink energy drinks. I haven't had one in a decade. If I drank a monster, I'd be jittery, and that doesn't help you either. Same with the food. If you're someone who doesn't eat a lot of like greasy food and like con food, like you said, it's gross. Like that can do if you're and I know people who exclusively will bring their own food because they're like, I have very sensitive bowels. If I eat con food, I'm gonna be spend half my round in the bathroom, right? Like type thing. So don't don't do too many drastic changes to your environment. And then I guess additionally, if you're traveling for your con, remember things like if you take allergy medication, remember that. If you take a daily, like remember your medications, things like that. Like it's a little bit of know yourself, but understand you are not in your normal controlled environment. So you need to take an extra 5 minutes before you're packing to just think about like, all right, let me make sure I bring like I always bring a little tube of Tylenol just in case. I always bring a couple cough drops. I always bring a couple snacks. Um, and I always bring a refillable water bottle. Just you never know. It's better to have it and not need it than need it and not have it.
Love that AVP reference. The my so I'm gonna close this because we've been talking for 45 minutes on the biggest piece of advice that I can give any player going to a convention or GT. Go with a friend. Going by yourself can be fun, but going with a friend or a group of friends, it's where you can like hang out afterwards at a hotel or an Airbnb, just so you can talk your guys' games out at the end of the day and just keep that whole mindset of um, enjoyment. uh, it'll make your event a lot faster. I went to Adepticon alone, but luckily I got in contact with Plugacoid and we shared an Airbnb and it made the experience a lot better. Being stuck in a hotel by yourself going to a GT is such a buzzkill to the end of the awesome day you had.
Totally agree. That's a great. I think that's a great shout out and a good note to end on.
All right, this has been The Chosen One, a Star Wars Shatterpoint podcast. I would like to again thank Daimyo Matt for showing up and stay tuned next week as we discuss rebellious scoundrels with the good, the bad, and the Wookiee, and we will have Accuser on.
Look forward to hearing that one.